the thing that's in front of us right now is AI. Marketing is taking on a different form because of AI. AI is just an aggregation of information that's out there right now. So if you ask it to write you a tweet about the Orange Pill app, it's going to take information that people have already said about the Orange Pill app, and it's going to aggregate that. AI at this point is not blazing new trails. So we have to think. AI is very smart, but it doesn't have a good imagination.
To kick it off, I'd love to hear more about what you're working on with the Orange Pill app. For everyone out there, this is an app that is made to allow you to connect with other types of Bitcoiners. I personally am on the app. I know that there are a bunch of amazing people within the community who are on the app. So you're the chief marketing officer of the Orange Pill app. So why don't you share with everyone what it is that you guys do, how you guys really have gotten to where you are today, and hopefully we can get some more Bitcoiners out there.
100%. Well, like you, I started off as a user of Orange Pill app. I mean, I met Matteo at Pacific Bitcoin when they launched. They launched at that event, and I was, their second day of signups ever. So I was an early adopter of Orange Pill app. But I caught the vision through talking to Matteo, who's the founder of Orange Pill app, at the booth at Pacific Bitcoin. And what caught me was it was two parts. I think that there's a really critical element of Bitcoiners meeting in real life. And then because I was finding that in real time. I'd been to a few Bitcoin events. I'd been to the Beef Initiative, Pacific Bitcoin, and a few smaller like local things. And it was just different than when I would do Twitter Spaces and those other things. I felt like Twitter Spaces was just kind of like my daily, my daily news, that type of thing. Like, that's fine. That's great for getting what's going on, getting a feel for personalities in the space, making connections. Because sometimes when you go to a Twitter space or a podcast, like you'll see the same people in the comments, so you might form a little bit of a relationship there. But there was just something so much more powerful about meeting in person, and so I was sensing that through these conferences and stuff. At the same time that Matteo was telling me about the Orange Pill app. So it all worked together really well. But then the second part, I said, well, like, what's your long-term vision? What's your roadmap look like? And he whipped out the roadmap and actually started showing me the roadmap. And one of the things that it was at the time, it was on the roadmap, but now we've already launched it, was the events page, which I think has been a smash hit right off the bat. So you can find local events, you can find events where you're going, and they're Bitcoin only events. I think one of the big things that was happening in Bitcoin was events were getting hijacked by like Web3. They would say, oh, come and talk about Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin SoCal meetup or something like that. And then you'd get there and it was just everybody talking about everything in the space. And so if you wanted to talk about Bitcoin and sound money, that was kind of getting lost in it. So that seemed cool to me. I thought the event sounded exciting, but really, really what stuck out, because I'm a small business owner myself, was the merchant side of things. It's going to be called the Orange Pages. And so we're partnering with BTC Maps. And so you can find local businesses that accept Bitcoin. But what makes it unique, why the partnership between BTC Maps and Orange Pill app makes it unique, is that BTC Maps has the supply side of the equation. So they have the places that are willing to accept Bitcoin, but Orange Pill app has the demand. We have people that are 100% Bitcoin, that are hardcore Bitcoiners, that are willing to pay for a social networking app. They're willing to pay a little bit of money in order to connect with other Bitcoiners specifically, right? Like they have free options. They can go on Instagram, they can go on Twitter, and we use a lot of those things. That's fine. But we understand that there's a lot of noise that comes along with that. So people are willing to pay a little bit of money to take out the spammers, the scammers, and the bots and all that kind of stuff and connect with other Bitcoiners. So that's a really powerful part of the equation when you talk about the Orange Pages, the fact that we're going to be able to bring Bitcoiners to these businesses. And so one of the things that I say all the time is like one of these really powerful things, and why when Matteo asked me if I wanted to come and be on the Orange Pill app team, a couple months after we met, was that I caught the vision for how Orange Pill app can possibly be a catalyst for hyperbitcoinization. So I think there's going to be two major things in short order, probably like in the not too distant future, that are going to be big sparks for hyperbitcoinization. I think one of them is is Jack Mallers and Strike and getting into Walmart or getting into one of those big blue chip companies. And when you walk into Walmart and you see a Bitcoin accepted here sign, that's going to be a big spark for hyper Bitcoinization. But that's like top level, right? Like that's the big companies, right? On the other end of the spectrum, what about the mom and pop shops? What about the donut store on the corner that all of a sudden accepts Bitcoin? We need to get those shops as well, right? We need to get a preponderance of stores that when you're walking down the street, you saw signs in Walmart that said Bitcoin accepted here, but you're seeing the nail salon and the donut shop and the hair salon, all these different places saying Bitcoin accepted here. We're going to be able to go in with Orange Pill app, take our phone and show these merchants. They might be merchants that have never been exposed to Bitcoin before. And we can go in and say, hey, I don't know how much you know about Bitcoin, but what I can say is you want more customers, right? They're going to say, yes, of course. Well, look I can show you 60 Bitcoiners in your area with this app right now that if you accept Bitcoin, they will come to you because Bitcoiners support Bitcoin businesses. Like if you're a donut shop, 60 Bitcoiners, whether they eat donuts or not, they're going to come in and buy a donut from you and they're going to take it to their work. Right. Who doesn't love a donut? I mean, you look like you're a pretty in shape guy, so I'm sure you stay away from your donuts, but you probably go buy one just to support them. Right. And so that's going to be a really powerful thing when it comes to hyper Bitcoinization, being able to go into stores and Orange Pill stores that really don't care about Bitcoin, but they care about customers. And so we're going to be able to bring them customers and Orange Pill them at the exact same time. So as far as being mission driven, I'm really mission driven with what we're doing at Orange Pill app, connecting Bitcoiners, because I think the social layer is a critical part of hyper Bitcoinization. And then I think the merchant adoption is another critical point of hyper Bitcoinization. So, yeah.
Yeah, when we first talked on the Twitter space, that was one of the big things that stood out to me about your journey. And I think relates to every single Bitcoiner, which is we all come in it in our own way. We all learn about it. But the thing that makes Bitcoin spread, that allows people to actually get involved, are the types of conversations that we're having right now and that the people that we speak with go and speak to, because it's a very complex topic. There are lots of layers. And I love what you guys are doing at the Orange Pill app. The value for value piece, I think that's huge. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm much more open to responding on the Orange Pill app than I would be on any other social media. It's because it's the only social media site that I pay for. I guess outside of Twitter, there's the Twitter Blue, but there's the understanding that you put down money, value for value, and then you almost have this curated network to a certain extent, but a curated network of people who are like-minded, who are Bitcoiners, who understand a lot of these things, where you're just going to get more along with people who are aligned with the types of values that you hold. And at the end of the day, every single person on that app talked with quite a few different people from it. And that's one thing that we all have in common. There's just that instant way to connect with someone because we're, at the end of the day, on the Orange Pill app.
Yeah. 100%. And I mean, even in the Twitter spaces, a few people from the Orange Pill app team were listening, and they texted me afterwards and they said, wow, Will from Sazmining, like he gets Orange Pill app. Like he totally gets it because you were doing a better pitch than I was even doing it. Like right there. I mean, that's so wonderful.
I just really like it.
And I'm grateful. And that's one of the things, I mean, for the average pleb that might be new into Bitcoin, or maybe they've been in Bitcoin, but they haven't really made a lot of social connections, they get to interact with, somebody like you, who's the CEO of a mining company, or Natalie Brunell, super responsive on there. Like everybody, when they text me all the time, they're like, I DM'd Natalie and she responded, and it was like a thoughtful message. Safedine responds to people. And to your point, you can be confident because when we get messages, even if our account's verified on Twitter, most of the other accounts aren't verified. So it's kind of a one-way street. They know we're valid, but we don't necessarily know if this is just somebody that's starting a conversation because they genuinely have questions. Because I mean, I'm sure you're that same way with Twitter. We get messages that say, hey, and that's it. And we normally block those or delete those. But I've had messages where I've responded and it's actually somebody on the other line. You strike up a conversation, but we don't have that time in our day to like suss out who's legit, who's not, who's just like trying to scam me, who's just trying to sell me something on Twitter. You get to bypass those whole first few stages with Orange Pill app. And so, yeah, I mean, it's Elon Musk said it perfectly. I mean, obviously he's trying to really pitch the Twitter Blue thing, but their platform isn't all verified. I think it's in this kind of middle stage where there's some positive things they're doing, but really you don't get the full benefit of that value for value pitch until the whole social network is validated and verified and paid for. But yeah, Elon Musk even said that. He said with AI, you can spin up 100,000 CAPTCHA busting bots in, for less than a penny. Like it doesn't cost you anything in order to do that. And so the only way to prevent that is to have some sort of paywall. So yeah, I mean, this is the future. And I firmly believe now I can say this because I didn't come up with the idea for Orange Pill app. I think that being the first social media company to start with a paywall to it, in order to be a feature for the benefit of the users of that app, I think that like business books are going to be written about that concept. Like it's a really interesting concept. And so once you're on the Orange Pill app, I understand people's hesitancy if they've never paid for a social network before. And they're like, why do I have to pay for this? There's other free ones out there. Once you're in the app, it all of a sudden makes sense. And so I just tell people all the time, like, if you want to try it out, just jump in for a month. Like if it's not your cup of tea, you can cancel, but there is something refreshing about once you're in the app, you have connections. I've met with, a half dozen people through the app, like in real life. We've gone and got coffee. I'm getting lunch on Friday with somebody. And so those are just really cool things that are material, that are of material value to my life. Like I have new friendships because of this social network. I have friendships with people that I would have never otherwise met. I get to have these experiences because this social layer of Bitcoin exists.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for the event happening in Miami because I'm going to be messaging a lot of people on the app leading up to it. Last year, actually, I think last year was the first time that they started doing an app for the conference. So if you were not the Orange Pill app, but the Bitcoin conference. And so this is going to be the first year where I actually have the Orange Pill app, and I'm just going to be DMing a bunch of people on there. So we'll see. Maybe I'll find some events from it. You said that you're going to be there this year, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to have a booth. We're going to have an Orange Pill app booth. And I'm also going to have a booth for my book for Bitcoin Evangelism. So, like we're going to be there in full effect. And we're talking to the BTC media guys about some other co-promotion opportunities and stuff, because it's really neat to see these big companies like BTC Media, who's putting on this giant conference, and they're seeing value in Orange Pill app. Like they went and uploaded their events to our events page and stuff. And we're like, you guys are the conference. And they took the time to, like, their CEO actually added the events himself. So we're really seeing some positive traction with everything that's going on here. And it's such a warm welcome. I get messages as like the marketing guy for Orange Pill app. We get messages of people every day that are like, hey, we see value in this. Like, how do we work together? And they see value not just in what they can provide for the community, but what the community can provide for them. Like it's a very symbiotic relationship. And that's, I think, how the orange future should look. I mean, Knut Svanholm talks about this all the time. He says that the way people interact with one another will just be different when we have a better monetary standard, that people aren't going to be as rent seeking. People are going to think about their reputation and the value that they provide for other people. They're only going to approach you not to ask what they can get from you, but to ask first what kind of value they can bring to you, because they know that if they do that, you're going to return value to them. So we're really seeing that. And it's almost like we're seeing a glimpse of what a Bitcoin standard looks like. And it's really refreshing and exciting. And even though we're in this kind of quasi bear market, quasi bull market or whatever, I check my phone, like the price of Bitcoin on my phone, almost not at all anymore, because I'm so focused on building, and I'm seeing, it's just, to me, the inevitability of Bitcoin being the standard for the world is just there. To me, it's inevitable. And so it's like, let's race to get as much social infrastructure in this space as we can, because it's happening. We need to hurry up and build, because it's going to happen any minute.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see the people who are building during the bear market, and then during the bull market, who's still left in the next cycle. I do want to dive into your book, Bitcoin Evangelism. You've done quite a bit in your time here in the Bitcoin industry. But before even diving into that book, one thing that I'm just personally very curious about is the fact that you've hit all of these different mediums as it relates to marketing, right? You've gotten experience building companies. You've had the experience of being a CMO. You've had the experience of going through the publishing process with a book, and you're someone who frequents Twitter Spaces and podcasts. So my question to you is, how do you think the landscape of marketing and media looks today? And with the rise of these new technologies and the rise of a Bitcoin world, do you have any predictions for where things are going? So if someone's out there listening, thinking, hey, there's a lot that you can do, there's a lot to spend your time on, how are you evaluating the current landscape as it relates to marketing?
That's a really good question. And I'm just looking at myself in the camera right here. I look beat up. I just came from playing. I've never played pickleball before, and I just played pickleball for the last 3 hours. So sorry, I'm looking busted up on camera here, but that was a great question. And so, yeah, how is Bitcoin? How is advertising or marketing different yesterday, today, and tomorrow? I mean, it's changed so much. So when I started my first company, I started right out of college in 2000. I'm 37. So I started my first company in 2008. It's actually, the company's still going today. I still run that company. Our biggest medium for growing our company, I owe all of the early success of our company to MySpace. And so
really?
we were able to market and grow our company through MySpace. The advertising and marketing we did back then was MySpace. So I've seen a few generations. Like Facebook was new. Like I remember when Facebook was new, and I remember when Instagram was our thing, and then these other mediums and stuff. So the thing that's in front of us right now is AI, right? I mean, you even mentioned I consult ChatGPT for different things. Like, it's just interesting to see what ChatGPT's take is on things. Like, I'm about to write a tweet. Let me see if ChatGPT can come up with a better version. Here's my wording. Can you reword this and stuff? Like, marketing is taking on a different form because of AI. And I think that the concern for marketers is, am I going to be displaced? Like, what is the value of marketers in the space right now? Yeah, the answer is there's a lot of people that could be displaced. You have to think outside of the box. Like, it's absolutely critical to do that, because you think about what is AI right now. So we're not talking about like AGI, artificial general intelligence, at this point. Like, at this point, and for I don't know how long, but AI is just an aggregation of information that's out there right now. So if you ask it to write you a tweet about the Orange Pill app, it's going to take information that people have already said about the Orange Pill app. It's going to take information that people have said, and it's going to aggregate that. So AI can probably beat the individual in terms of aggregating things that people have already done. So if you're just being part of the noise, if you're just doing some, the same old thing that everybody else has done in marketing, you're probably going to get left in the dust. What AI doesn't do, if this is all the information right here, or this is all the different marketing styles that have ever existed, AI can accomplish this. What we need to do as marketers is start to create new things. AI at this point isn't creating new things. Even artificial intelligence art, it's taking bits and pieces of images that exist right now, and it's reformatting them. So how do we think outside of the box? How do we create new frontiers? AI at this point is not blazing new trails. So we have to think, how do we blaze a new trail? How do we gamify Twitter to make it interesting? How do we gamify our social apps to make them interesting in ways that AI can't imagine yet? Because AI is very smart, but it doesn't have a good imagination. And I think that's where humans still went out. So we need to be very imaginative. Sorry, my gardener just showed up, by the way. So there's a lawnmower going.
All good. All good. I love that you brought in AI. I don't think I've told you this, but I've been absolutely obsessed with it, especially over the past few months. But I mean, I took an entire week off at one point once things started exploding with ChatGPT 3.5. He said, I just need to take some time away so I can just put 100% of my focus on understanding and learning about this stuff, because it is just unbelievable what this technology can do. And from a marketing standpoint, I agree. It's like, how do you not get displaced in a big way? It sounds like the right answer is just continue to think outside the box. When you look at marketing, how do you think about it? Do you think about it as the best way to capture attention? Do you think about it in terms of the most amount of people that you can reach? Or persuasion? I'm just curious as to how you actually think about the concept of marketing effectively.
Yeah, I think that the best type of marketing, at least in this day and age, we talked already about value for value. I think it's marketing that provides value for somebody. So effective marketing is something that's why memes are so powerful, because they either bring a really interesting message, like they package a truth in a very interesting way, or they just make something funny, right? Like you're providing value for the other person. It's the same thing in writing my book. I think my book is essentially marketing for Bitcoin. Like that's what my book was intended to be. Now it's intended to be truthful. It's intended to be accurate. It's intended to have all these like core truths and values that are correct. But the point of that was to provide value for people so that they would then get on the Bitcoin standard and they would then adopt Bitcoin. So I think that, yeah, if it's a tweet, I try not to tweet something just because I think it's going to get a lot of likes. That's great. That's great for attention. And if you do say something that provides them, like, I think likes are the currency of how much value you provided in a given tweet. Maybe that's not always accurate, but I think for the most part, it probably is. And beyond that, I'm trying to think of like something, there might be a popularity contest. I think that's where some people's reputation, some people can be so cool, or they can be such a popular influencer that they can just tweet absolute nonsense and then people like it and share it just because people want to feel cool, or they comment just so that Elon Musk will respond to them or that Kim Kardashian will respond to them. So there are people maybe that are so famous that get they get responses and interactions that are kind of vain. But I think as far as for people, like when Sazmining tweets something, or I actually find your guys' tweets very interesting, like yours specifically, because you're constantly talking about the state of the industry. You're talking about the state of what your guys are doing. You're like, here's what hydroelectric power means for Bitcoin mining. If you were to talk to me in 2015, even though I was in Bitcoin at the time, I would have never thought that I'd read a report on green renewable energy and that I would be that fascinated by it. I thought it'd be something that I would just inevitably accept because I had to. I never thought I would be excited and wanting to like be a part of helping push the envelope in that. So yeah, I think it comes down to value production for people. And yeah, likes and shares should be probably the currency to let you know whether you're doing a good job or not.
For everyone listening, I remember I think that this was actually the first time that you and I had ever communicated. It was on one of Sazmining's Twitter spaces when you came up onto stage and you mentioned something that it's funny hearing the value for value piece now, because you mentioned this idea of rewarding people with sats for attending a Twitter space. And I just thought that's one of the reasons why right now I'm thinking, okay, well, I got to ask about this approach to marketing, because it was a genius idea, just an easy way to incentivize people to come and then learn, and then they walk away with some more sats. And I think it's the same type of thing too with getting people into Bitcoin. One of the things that I've noticed and that some people do extremely, extremely well is just give people Bitcoin as a gift. It's like, if you need to get someone a gift, get them some Bitcoin. They're going to be forced to learn about it if they actually want to be able to spend that Bitcoin. So it's just really interesting to hear just how different people spread their messages. Your book, Bitcoin Evangelism, I think has a lot of great ideas in terms of how to actually teach people about Bitcoin or get them involved, meeting them where they're at. So I know we talked about it one time on a Twitter space, but for all the listeners here who didn't have a chance to tune into that, could you talk a little bit about what was the genesis of the idea behind Bitcoin Evangelism, and what did you learn in writing that book?
Yeah, well, real quick, going back to that Twitter Spaces where you were talking about where we gave out sats for tuning into the episode. What I find so like the social experiment that I like to do with that is you give people 500 sats or 1,000 sats just for tuning in, taking a screenshot of themselves in the space, and then they can leave. But what happens, and this is where I like to prove to people that when you send them to something that's cool, like I wouldn't send them to a Twitter space that had no value. Like I wouldn't send them to like a Dogecoin. Hey, I'm going to give you 100 sats to go to this Dogecoin Twitter space because I don't think there's particularly value. And I've actually sat in those, crypto Twitter spaces before just to see what's going on. Like, hey, I wonder what's going on with Ether now. And so I'll sit in and listen. And man, it is just a different type of conversation. But that's why I feel confident, like, hey, I'll pay somebody to go check out a Sazmining space, because if you haven't heard of Sazmining, they're doing some really interesting stuff over there. People stay. They only have to be there for a split second to capture video, but you can prove in real time that they're seeing value in what they're doing because they stay for another hour, no matter what they were doing in the middle of the day. So they're paying with their time and attention to show that they're getting value out of what they did. So I like to be sneaky with the way that we do things. Like, yeah, I'm going to give you sats, but actually the real value is going to come in once you park it here for a while and you listen in. But yeah, as far as the genesis for Bitcoin evangelism, it goes back to I was a chief marketing officer at a blockchain project. I worked on a blockchain project back in 2017, 18, 19 called Athenium. And it was a nice group of people, like very good intentioned group. So when people say, oh, every crypto project is intentionally a scam, it wasn't intentionally a scam. It was highly centralized. And there was a group that we thought, oh, we can decentralize this project over time. But I realized that the way consensus protocols work, there's just too much power within people. And then there was going to be too much weight. There's too many ways to maintain power as the core group over a long period of time. And so that was just a really good learning curve. I remember thinking, like, I started in Bitcoin only and then went into altcoins, thought that this was like a really interesting space. We can use blockchain to decentralize all sorts of different things. And you can use blockchain to decentralize all sorts of things. I think a lot of Bitcoiners say, all we're going to decentralize is money. I actually don't think that's true. But the thing is, you need a protocol that is truly decentralized. And at this point, Bitcoin's the only one that wins that race. And so if you want to look at altcoins as research and development departments for Bitcoin, I think that some of the functions that are built on top of Ethereum might be built on multiple layers of Bitcoin at some point, or other things that are being developed on other chains, DeFi, NFTs, whatever. We're starting to see some of that stuff get built on top of Bitcoin. I think that that's the natural progression. And that's the way it actually makes sense to me. Firsthand, working on a altcoin project for 3 years, there was too many ways to manipulate the price. And then there was, so seeing the centralization was a big issue for me and coming in my journey of coming back to Bitcoin only. And then there was an exchange that our token was on. And I remember I was up late one night and I was on the exchange and I was like, you know what, there's only $200 of our coin on this exchange. What happens if I buy up all those coins? And so I bought up all the coins. I soaked up all the liquidity on that exchange. And then I sold the next one to myself because the exchange didn't regulate. Like you could initiate a sell order and then do a buy order. I sold the next. So our token price was 2 cents a coin. I sold the next coin to myself for $1. So instead of it being 2 cents a coin, I magically made the price go up to $1 in one sale because there was so little liquidity. And I wanted to test. I wanted to see how flimsy is this market right now? Like when I make this sale, is it going to update on CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko and all these different sites? Sure enough, our market cap went from like several $100,000 to millions of dollars off of a $1 transaction. When I bought a token for $1, it went out to all the websites within a minute. It auto-populated those sites and it said that our market cap, we went from like coin number 1200 to number 400 off me buying a coin for $1. And so I sold it back down to 2 cents. I equalized the market just to make sure. But I was curious if that would happen. That was such an eye-opening moment that our coin could be manipulated. So between that and then seeing the centralization, I said, wow, this was a really good learning experience for me. Like I love the guys in the project and they had a noble mission that they wanted to do. But unfortunately, I think that we didn't have the tools in place. And so I wanted to write a book that could speak to two kinds of people. Christian evangelism, there's two types of people. I'm a Christian. We think in terms of evangelizing and sharing the gospel and the truth. And, I think that if heaven exists, then it's probably one of the things that we should talk about more than anything. I think money is a very nice second. I think money, if Bitcoin is legit, it's very important for people. So that's why I spend a lot of my time talking about money as well. And so in Christian evangelism, there's two types of people that you evangelize to. There's atheists, people that don't believe in any deity. And then there's people that believe in other deities that aren't yours, right? You call them pagans, you can call them, Gentile, whatever you want to call them. And so I think that in Bitcoin is very much the same way. We have the no coiners and the skeptics. And then we also have the altcoiners, the people that, they believe in crypto, but they believe in all these different, they want something faster, better, more scalable, whatever they say about their other projects. And so I wanted to write a book that kind of helped take people through my journey, starting in Bitcoin, going into the altcoin section, realizing like, okay, this technology is interesting. I've had people write to me and say, wow, you're really soft on altcoins. Like at one point, it sounded like you were pro altcoin. I actually am not. And that's not how the book was written. The book was written in a sense of, here is kind of like, you're supposed to go on this journey through with me to be intrigued by altcoins. Let me tell you about why an Oracle protocol like Chainlink is interesting. Like it's okay as a Bitcoiner to say those things are interesting, but at the end of the day, they lacked decentralization. And so that's what the book brings you back to at the end, is that Bitcoin really is unique. That's why we have Bitcoin and we have altcoins. There's two categories. There's 13,000 of these coins or 20,000 of them, but why do they all fit into two categories? And Bitcoin's the only one in this category because it's the only one that's decentralized. So I think it's important for people to understand that. And for no coiners, hopefully it takes them through that journey before they go through that journey on their own. Right when they get into Bitcoin, they get into Bitcoin and they stay in Bitcoin, and they don't have to spend money and lose money and be involved in scams and rug pulls and things like that, and contribute to projects that might be less than ethical. So that's the goal of that. I think that it's a book that you can give to your no coin friend. And I think it's definitely a book you could give to your altcoin friend. And it's very amicable. I don't like cast accusations. I was somebody that thought these things at one point, and here's why I no longer think them. And I think it's been pretty fruitful so far.
I feel like every single person can relate to that type of a story in some type of way. I mean, even Brad Mills, he was on a podcast. I think I recorded with him about a month ago, and Brad has been taken through the ringer so many times. I mean, the number of times that this guy has gotten scammed is unbelievable. And he's just very open about it. He said, look, this is what happened, but I learned from it. And he learned, and lo and behold, when Celsius and some of the BlockFi and these other large companies were, before going into bankruptcy, Brad was out there calling them out because he had seen the writing on the wall a number of other times. And I myself, before coming to a lot of the beliefs that I hold true today with Bitcoin, I had heard about Bitcoin. I dove down that rabbit hole of learning about Ethereum, learning about all these other types of altcoins. Many people don't know this, but in the very early days of Sazmining, we had also done GPU mining. So we had a bunch of different models of GPUs, and we were mining Ethereum and Zcash, and we actually mined some of these other coins before Bitcoin. But as you dive deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, you realize that, okay, Bitcoin is the legitimate current cryptocurrency, if you even want to compare it to that. But it is what has achieved product market fit for what it's trying to do. And there's a lot of real world use cases for it. Whereas you mentioned a lot of these other altcoins are more of a experimenting ground for the use cases of what can be brought onto Bitcoin. In some of the earlier days with Ethereum and some of these other cryptos, I'll give you my own personal experience. I had one of those ledgers, and this was in the very early days of the ICOs of 2017, I should say, where there are these different coins. There was a lot of hype. There wasn't a lot behind them, and anyone could go and spin up a coin, and if it trades in a certain way, it gets a crazy market cap. So I went through that. I got burned on a couple of things that really I had no business being involved in. So you take a couple hits there, and I had some of these coins that quickly fell to being worthless. And then I saw Ethereum and Bitcoin hold its value more. But this entire process is just a learning process. Even being able to participate in some of these token sales does take some background technological expertise to be able to do it. You need to have a ledger. You need to go into some type of exchange that isn't the normal Coinbase or more regulated, quote unquote, exchange that everyone's using. And it takes time to really learn about all this stuff. So I like your approach in terms of having empathy for everyone out there, wherever they are on the journey. It's a long ride to get to a point to understanding where the true value is in this ecosystem. And the final point I will say on this is this past week, it was NFT week here in New York. And I, as a Bitcoiner, was going to some of these events. And no, there were no Bitcoiners at any of these events. And it was funny hearing them talk about their experiences and hearing about all the different NFT projects that are doing very well now. I'm hearing about these crazy pumps and these people, oh, I got into this token at this price and then it went up to this. And oh, I was in it and it was at here and then it tanked down to 1/20th of what it was worth. And it was so interesting to me because I saw all these people who are extremely, extremely intelligent, so deep into this NFT world. And I really just walked away with the idea that this is such a player versus player industry. If you're going and you're participating in this world of pump and dumps or altcoins where you're just trying to get in and get out at a high price, you're competing against all these other people who are doing the exact same thing. And there's a certain amount of money, there's a certain amount of liquidity. And if you're bad at it, or you're new, or you're just getting in on some coin and you have no idea what your strategy is, you are going to lose your money. And if you're very sophisticated and you're able to get in, get out, or you're involved with the project, then you're going to take some people to the cleaners. And it is not the same type of approach to a market as you have in Bitcoin, where you have a lot of people like you and others who are building organizations who are trying to provide real value, and they can actually build a model to sustain that business.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier is when you go to these NFT things, like kind of how when I was saying I jump into a crypto Twitter space and listen in, it's just a different type of conversation. It's such a fiat mindset. And I think that's one of the big differences. The crypto community really talks in terms of fiat. Like I know we denominate Bitcoin in dollars. And so like maybe we're not completely blameless for that either. But so much of the NFT space and so much of the crypto space is, yes, I bought here, I sold here, and then I got out. One of the shows I listen to like a couple times a week I listen to it on YouTube is Thinking Crypto. It's a crypto show. It's a bit very like XRP heavy show, but they do like general news of the industry. I'm genuinely interested in the XRP SEC case and things like that. But it's just so frustrating listening to the host of that because he talks about, when Bitcoin gets to this price, then I'm going to, cash out and do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that's unfortunately, it's people are getting trained in this wrong mindset. Like, what's the perfect price to sell Bitcoin at? It's the price at which you just buy more stuff with your Bitcoin. Like that's the price you sell at. I bought Bitcoin at the value of a crappy car, and then I used it when I could buy a really nice car or whatever it happens to be. Maybe you want to be more frugal. That's fine. But I think that's more the mindset. Maybe I bought Bitcoin when I could buy one apple with the Bitcoin. Now I can buy 100,000 apples with the Bitcoin. To me, that's more of a Bitcoin standard type of mindset as opposed to I bought this NFT for $10. I sold it for $20. I now have more dollars. Unfortunately, those dollars are the depreciating part of the equation here. And so that's, again, one of those differentiators between that NFT space and the Bitcoin space. But yeah, it is interesting. I think it's good for us to go and see what's out there and understand, and just, offer olive branches too, because I think that we can be toxic Bitcoiners. And I know that there's people that think that's a very successful way to go about it. And I'm sure there are. I actually had that conversation with Brad Mills on a Swan, Cafe Bitcoin space. We were talking about my book and I was talking about that same thing, the pagans and the atheists and all that kind of stuff. And I said, amongst the evangelists, there's two types of evangelists. There's the hellfire and brimstone evangelist. And then there's like the Jesus ate with sinners evangelist. And I tend to be more like the Jesus ate with sinners type of evangelist. And then Brad Mills goes, oh, I didn't realize that. He tweeted this out later. He goes, Brian DeMint just told me I'm a hellfire and brimstone type of evangelist. And I'm like, but like you said, he's been burned a few times. And so he has good reason. I guess there's a third type. There's the crusader evangelist that goes and says like, convert or I'm going to chop your head off. So at least we're not that bad, right? Like maybe those are the really toxic Bitcoiners that say like, I want nothing to do with you. But I think that's good for us to balance out the really toxic Bitcoiners, so that altcoiners might know that not all of us are mean.
I'm actually very curious now about this Ripple case because I've been following Bitcoin very closely. I haven't really heard too much of what's happening outside of Bitcoin. So if you've been following that type of content or that type of news, whether it's the Ripple case or anything else, I'd love to hear more about what you've been learning.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that's gone on because it's like a 2-year long case at this point. But it does sound like Ripple is kind of kicking the SEC's butt at each juncture. And yeah, it's based off of, I forget what the case is. It's the Howey test, right? That decides if something's a security or not. And it really doesn't seem to apply. Like when you break down the Howey test, it doesn't necessarily seem to like have a good way to use that. We need to, regulatory agencies need to come up with new criteria for new technologies. That's just what it comes down to. And I think that's why there's such a problem. And that's why it's being litigated right now, is because the standard for what is a security or not is hard to apply to new and emerging technology. So we'll see what happens. I think that Ripple will probably win the case. And I'm not necessarily voting for, it's weird. It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because I don't like the SEC very much. I'm not a huge fan of Ripple because other news that will pop up in my feed will be things like XRP is going to be one of the coins used for central bank digital currencies, like internationally. So jurisdictions, sovereign nations that don't have a lot of infrastructure themselves, like XRP is going to be the bridge asset for these CBDCs and stuff. And that's kind of always how I've thought of XRP. It's like this weird thing. They're fighting the SEC, but I always kind of thought of them as like the banker coin. They're the ones that are partnering with the banks. They're the ones that are saying like, hey, JP Morgan, if you want to send your money to Tokyo, we'll be the bridge asset for that. So they're really trying to cozy up to the bank. So it's a weird thing. I don't really know who I'm rooting for here, but it does sound like Ripple's probably going to come out of this I think they're going to come out with a win by the end of it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. That's the tough part, because does it open the floodgates for saying that all coins are not securities when clearly some coins are? I think that most coins are. I think if you have a CEO and you have profit structure and all this kind of stuff, it seems like you're operating as a company. And so I think it would probably be best for things that are operating as companies to be regulated like the rest of the market. I'm not for regulation in general, but if that's the structure that we're going to agree to, then that's the rules that they should go under. XRP claims to be decentralized, but then yet they have a company that backs them. So it does make it difficult to say that they're not a security. But based off of the letter of the law, I do think that they're going to win, because the Howey test seems to be a bit antiquated.
Yeah, I need to brush up on the Howey test. I used to know all the different requirements for it, but I do not know them off the top of my head anymore. It's interesting too, because I mean, you've built organizations. I'd be curious to hear your experience, but the way that I almost fell into building companies was that you have this idea, you have an idea of the people that you can help, and then what you need to do in order to service those people, the quote unquote, the market, those customers. And there's so many different things that have to get done in order to just get that right, to get an MVP out, to get product market fit. But then you have this whole other land that no one thinks of or really talks about too much when they're starting, which is the compliance side of things. I mean, you look at these massive companies, they've got huge compliance departments, they've got chief legal officers, they've always got cases and litigation going on, and it's a lot to manage. And when you're starting a company, you don't really, at least I naturally that wasn't the top of my list. The top of my list was, okay, how are we going to get product market fit? How are we going to help these people? And the Howey test, it's interesting because normally I would say that I'm more free market. I don't want regulations, things like that. And the Howey test is one of these things that's being applied to the crypto industry, which is, okay, is this a security? And for everyone listening, obviously you can't have unregistered securities offerings. And that's been this whole topic in crypto where you have all these tokens that would, in many cases, look like they're violating securities law, which would be illegal if you were one of the people who was doing this, running something that goes astray of securities law. You can lose the ability to ever issue securities again. You could potentially go to jail. There are a lot of bad ramifications that could happen, but a lot of people were playing in this gray area of the law because of this new technology. Like you mentioned, the laws always have to adapt to new technologies. And if the laws aren't being updated or there isn't some type of guidance being given, then what are you going to do if you're building an organization? Are you going to toe the line? Are you going to completely avoid it? I mean, we saw a company like EOS, they raised $4 billion with what many would consider, they're very early, but many would consider to be a violations of securities law. So it's going to be really interesting. I have not been following the Ripple case, but yeah, I guess I probably just shouldn't weigh in on it. My view is that a lot of these cryptos were unregistered securities, but I've also seen a lot of the bad side of it. I've seen people that just got absolutely taken to the ringer, myself included, thankfully not for crazy amounts of money, but these token offerings, they really, in many cases, especially if the team's not even working on it, or they wouldn't have been allowed to raise the money in that type of a way if they just didn't toss a coin on that had no purpose. I feel like a lot of those really are a violation of securities law and don't seem to pass the Howey test, but it's tough. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I think what it comes down to, and I think the fairest way to go about this and the way that the Howey test would apply is, do you have an organization and the people buying the thing, whether it's stock or coin or token or whatever, do they have an expectation of profit? Like, that's the most basic way, I think, to define that. And you can't always, I guess, judge motives when somebody's buying something. Was somebody buying it because they really liked it? Like the NFT, did they like it? Did they buy it because they liked the art, or were they doing it because they expected profit? Now, it really comes down to how the company is marketing it, right? Like, that's the only thing that we can prove is when they have ads, like, and that's early on in the ICO thing. It was companies, or it was groups of people saying, buy this token and it's going to have a 4,000% appreciation. Like, there was people marketing it specifically as this will appreciate in value. To me, it's like, that's so clear. You don't even need to go through a trial for that. It's like, that's prima facie, like that's violating it on its face. But on the flip side, you have Gary Gensler, who was in front of Congress yesterday, and they were asking him, is Ethereum a security? And he just won't answer the question. Like, just answer it. That's fine. Like, go one way or the other. They've been clear on Bitcoin, and I think that's good. But it's like they've only been clear on Bitcoin in terms of making statements about it. They haven't been clear on Bitcoin as far as regulatory processes and things like that. So it seems so clear to me that they want to leave it as is and then just sue the pants off of these companies as it comes along. And it's like, that's honestly not very fair. If somebody's running it, like when I was back on the Ethereum project, again, we had good motives. We weren't doing weird things and telling people to buy this token because it was going to go up in value or yada yada yada. We were really trying to solve a problem out in the world. That would have sucked if we were like in violation of this because it was just a gray area and they decided to attack us because they know we didn't have a lot of financial recourse and they could just sue us, take the rest of our money, and then we'd be done. Like, that's not a good system. Like, enforcement by punishing companies is just not the way that our country should be run. So give clear distinction, and then we can wipe a lot of this stuff off the table. If Ethereum is deemed a security, this is my prediction on what would happen. I think it would crash the price temporarily. I think everybody's expectation is that it would make Ethereum go away forever. I don't think it would. People trade companies on stock exchanges every single day, especially if they are marketed as interesting new technology. I think the Ethereum price would crash initially, but Ethereum basically has a company right now. They essentially have a CEO. They essentially have infrastructure at Consensus. Like they pretty much have all those roles together. So that company would just need to incorporate and then get behind it, follow regulation, pay fees. But then I think once they're deemed quote unquote legitimate, like a legitimate security, I think that their price would appreciate. I'm not saying go out and buy Ethereum for that reason, but I actually don't think it's going to have this like crushing effect on every crypto project out there. I think the small ones will go away. The ones that are out and out absolute scams will go away. But ones that are big enough, I mean, whether you think Ethereum's a scam or not, I think Ethereum's just so big that they would be able to make that transition. I think they would have the financial resources to make that transition, get into compliance and all that kind of stuff. You know, obviously they'd be paying the SEC probably hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and all sorts of stuff. But I think ultimately that would give like, this is the government stamp of approval on this crypto. And so now I think the price would probably run a year or two down the road because of that. So I think initial crash, and then it would probably go up. So for Bitcoiners that are looking for regulation and clarity to be the nail in the coffin for crypto, I don't think that's going to be it. I think the nail in the coffin for crypto is about educating people. It's about helping people understand the fundamental tenets of Bitcoin. And so our work won't be done just when we get clear regulation.
When you look at what happened with a lot of these crypto projects, it's crazy because a lot of them were playing in the gray zone, which I think the natural entrepreneur does, right? If you're building something, you aren't the average everyday person. You don't necessarily always play by the rules. And so we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs go and do very well. I think even Uber, right? Uber early on, when you listen to Travis's, the then CEO, who ended up getting in some other controversy, when you heard his approach to it, he said, hey, we'll build it, we'll put it out there, and then people will love it so much that the regulators will just have to accept it. And that's kind of what happened. Imagine if you didn't have Uber today. Imagine if you didn't have ride sharing. I legitimately don't really know how, because I mean, I'm, as you could probably tell, I'm pretty young. I've almost always had a world with Uber. So just thinking about the world before Uber, I mean, yeah, it's that's a service that wouldn't have come into the world if it wasn't for an entrepreneur taking a risk. And in that gray zone with crypto and with the Howey test, with securities, there was the big risk of, let's say that entrepreneurs didn't play in that gray zone, that the innovation would happen elsewhere. I mean, right now we're seeing this particularly in the mining industry. I know that this has been big talk of the New York Times hit piece and this whole conversation around the energy use of mining. And with this, I'm looking at it from someone who's leading a company within the Bitcoin mining industry. And we directly have to make decisions around what the regulators decide to do. If we perceive any type of geopolitical risk of how the mining industry in the US is going to be treated, then we've got to take that into account. You don't want to be a miner in China when they shut it down and make it illegal, and you have to go and find a way to scramble and find hosting for your mining machines outside of China. So same type of thing in the US. It's a data point if we say, okay, look, if they can stop demand response in Texas, that's not a game ender for a mining operation, but that does affect your bottom line. Demand response is a great way for Bitcoin miners to help support the local electrical grid. And it's also a great way for them to bring in another revenue stream. So it is all decision points. I guess the point I'm getting at is that regulation matters. It makes sense. It's something that you got to pay attention to. It's also something that you've got to make your own decision on as an entrepreneur. Where are you going to play? Are you going to play in that gray space? Or are you going to just decide, hey, I'm going to opt out of this. I'm going to go and operate in another country. From the Orange Pill app's point of view, how are you guys looking at this? Because in the Twitter space, I don't want to misquote, but you guys are in a lot of countries right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we're all over the world. I forget what the last count on how many countries. And like I said earlier, we launched in November. And so we're still a fairly young company, under 6 months old as far as active users and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're in most countries at this point. And so, yeah, it's the nice thing is that there's not a lot of regulation around that component of things. And so we just we have to apply or abide by U.S. regulation because that's where we're based, and so that is pretty straightforward. And we have a legal department. We actually have found. So we had legal before, but we found more legal help through Orange Pill app, which was amazing. Like we found another attorney to add to our team through the app itself, which was great because we know that they're like somebody that's very much backing this concept and that sort of thing. So, but yeah,
great US for networking, OPA.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think that's been one of the biggest use cases for people is people have like found graphic designers and there's almost like this gig economy kind of developing on Orange Pill app because you can search for people by all sorts of things, right? If they put it in their bio, you can find it. Like, if somebody's looking for Bitcoin mining, they're going to find Will in there because, he has CEO of Sazmining in his bio, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, from a regulatory standpoint, it's more general tax compliance and those types of things. Social networking isn't something that it's looked at a little bit different than social media. And that's a big distinction on what we do. It's social networking and not social media. So we don't have a lot of people, with the issue of free speech and all that kind of stuff, because it's direct communications. Like there's nobody, nobody's posting something that could be deemed hate speech that needs to be taken down and that sort of thing. It's interpersonal connections. If somebody says something to you in a DM that you don't like, you just block them. Like it's a really self-censored type of thing. So a lot of the noise that you hear in the general social media sphere, that just doesn't happen with what we're dealing with. We haven't had to go before Congress to answer like Mark Zuckerberg for, all the, Russia collusion and all that nonsense and stuff like it's just crazy what happens when you get into honestly just free social media apps that are open to anybody and bots. Like that's really what gets you in trouble. The paywall again has been such a brilliant feature because it allows us to say exactly to our consumer what we do and who we are. If you want to participate in this, you're not just acknowledging it by checking a box that says, I acknowledge the terms and conditions. Like you're saying, I'm actively finding so much value in this that I'm paying for it. So the compliance is essentially a self-correcting thing. Everybody's opting in of their own volition. And it's the easiest thing in the world to manage as far as that front goes.
The other day I was speaking with Jamie King. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's put together some great films around topics in our industry. One of his films is called This Machine Greens. He's working on another one. He came out with another film called Steal This Film, and he's working on another one right now called Trust. But it was interesting hearing his perspective on how narratives play such a big role in not only our industry, but just the world at large. He was talking about how narratives play a big role in politics, for example. And I'm wondering, from your perspective and the lens that you're seeing everything, what type of a role do you think the current news cycle, culture, narratives that we see in the mainstream are playing into Bitcoin? And where I'm trying to go with this is trying to get your take on predictions for the future. So just like we've seen Bitcoin come so far in the past 10 years, I'm just trying to take everything in, take in all these data points, and then from your point of view, see where you see Bitcoin going in the next 10 years.
I think that's really interesting to think about. I think about that a lot, actually. And it'll be interesting. I think that you got companies like yours that are really pushing the green narrative, the fact that Bitcoin's energy use used to be, and it still is, I guess, to a large degree, but Bitcoin's energy use is used as a reason to hate on Bitcoin when it's one of the greatest things about it. And you have guys like Jason Mayer who are out there writing books for progressives to get on board. I think that right now you're seeing a lot of politicization of this, right? Left versus right on this. I think that, like I said earlier, as far as it's about spreading the education. And so when progressives understand that, yeah, if you care about the environment, like if you really care about the environment, like if you're not just hijacking the environment narrative to suit your political ends, which there's a lot of people that do that, just like people hijack, terrorism or something like that to suit their warmongering and all that kind of stuff. There's people that hijack narratives, but if there's people, and there are people out there that really do care about the environment, the Bitcoin narrative is going to win. I think that regardless of whether you believe that the world's going to end in 12 years because of global warming or not, I don't fall in that camp. But I, as a conservative person, I believe that we're stewards of the earth that God has given us. And so I also don't want to pollute the earth. So my progressive friends and my own values, although they're coming from a different means, we have the same end in mind. Like, we want an earth that is not heavily polluted. And if you want that, you need to find a solution that monetizes energy, and that you can't force green energy on the world. It's just not going to work. It's not going to make fiscal sense unless you have something that is location independent, that is flexible to turn on and turn off when humans actually need that energy. To me, that the more people learn about the Bitcoin energy narrative, it's just a no-brainer. I used to shy away from that a long time ago. Like, somebody brings up Bitcoin's energy use. Like, let's just not talk about that. Let me talk about how Bitcoin scarcity works or something like that. I think people get Bitcoin scarcity. I think that is out there. Even skeptics of Bitcoin, they might not know how Bitcoin actually is a fixed supply, but they understand that. And that's probably clearer than ever with all the inflation and money printing that we've seen. But I think more socially liberal elements of Bitcoin will become more popular over the next few years. And I think that sound money is going to inevitably win out. I think that we were talking offline about going and orange pilling Congress. Orange Pill app, we have an initiative.
Let's talk about that if you're open.
Okay, yeah. And I think this is all part of the same thing. So Mateo, in this, either a stroke of genius or he was just up late one night and then fired off a tweet that he didn't know. I don't know. I think it was genius. He's a pretty smart guy, but might have just been a late night tweet. He tweeted out, he said, if Saifedean joins Orange Pill app, we're going to buy 535 copies of the Bitcoin Standard for every member of Congress, the House and the Senate. And so when you look at it, it's like $8,000 worth of books. I'm like, what are you thinking, Mateo? Like, we're a startup. We're well capitalized. We got like great investors and stuff like that. But like, I don't know if, a new company should be spending $8,000 on books. I'm like, this guy's crazy. Sure enough, Saifedean joins the next day. So like, dang, now we've got to do this. Like, of course we want to do this. We want Congress to get orange pilled, but now we've got to like figure out how to pay for all these books. Sure enough, Geyser Fund comes along and they say, hey, we're going to help you guys raise funds for this. We're going to do a Geyser Fund crowdfunding thing. And sure enough, we've raised thousands and thousands of dollars. Now we have Dennis Porter's on board with us. I don't know how familiar. I think you guys have had Dennis Porter on one of your Twitter spaces before.
Yeah, I met him in DC.
Did you? Okay, yeah. There you go. So if you got to DC, we're all gonna hang out. You, me, Dennis, and Mateo.
That's what I was gonna say. Because I didn't see your tweet actually up until just before this conversation, okay. And I read it. Stroke of genius on Mateo's part is we'll say that he's a genius, because I think that is just so smart. I mean, we could try and book time to get in front of one of these congressmen, and you can do the best pitch, well prepared, in a quick 30 minutes, 1 hour. But there's nothing like someone reading the book and then coming to their own conclusions on it versus someone trying to pitch them on it. Yeah. So I think it's absolutely genius. Let's get every single one of these Congress members to be able to read the Bitcoin Standard. And then I think the job of actually orange pilling them gets 100% easier.
Right. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've seen people say in the comments, like the skeptics of this, right? Bitcoiners, we should be skeptical. So I always like when my Bitcoiners come out and they're like, oh, why are you guys doing this? They pass bills that they don't even read. So they're not going to read this book, that sort of thing. And I say, you know what? Of course, there's going to be some that read the book and there's going to be some that don't. But guess how powerful this is going to be. The book is just like it's a Trojan horse, really. I mean, for those that read the book, of course, they're going to get orange pilled and their minds are going to be open to that. But for any any pleb that wants to join us, shoot me a DM through Orange Pill app, shoot me a DM on Twitter. Let's connect. If anybody wants to come out to DC with us, we could use help handing these books out. But when we're already getting a group of people that are like influential movers and shakers in Bitcoin, like yourself, this I think is going to be so powerful. When we can go up to somebody, we can hand them the book and say, hey, what do you know about Bitcoin? Like, I don't know, I don't know much about it. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. But we can speak to things that are really important to politicians. And that begs the question, like, what's important to a politician? Well, votes and having a demographic that's a powerful demographic, that's a wealthy demographic that will get behind. Sometimes a single issue on things is a very important demographic. And then also the ability to raise funds is another thing that they care about. And then every politician right now cares about the green narrative. Like, even if you're a conservative person, you have to entertain the green narrative because the society is moving towards a green narrative, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And so we're going to be in that group of people. If you, me, Dennis Porter, and Mateo are standing there talking to these Congress people, we're going to be able to say, hey, guess what? We have a social network that has thousands of Bitcoiners on it. Mr. Congressman, you can jump on this app and access your people because they represent a location, right? They're going to be able to go home and see all the plebs that are in their district, and they're going to be able to meet with these plebs one-on-one. They're going to be able to, if they represent the Bitcoin vote, they will be able to get the Bitcoin vote, right? Bitcoiners will get behind these people like Cynthia Loomis and these people that are up there speaking for Bitcoin. The Bitcoiners are behind them, and the Bitcoiners are then funding them too. Geyser Fund. We have an app to reach the demographic, and then we have an app to reach the crowdfunding side. So you want your campaign funded? Well, guess what? Bitcoiners are a particularly wealthy group of people that will get behind politicians that will push fair and balanced legislation around money and those types of things. And then guess what? Oh, you're worried about Bitcoin's energy use? Well, guess what? Look who's over here. I have Will from Sazmining, who runs a mining company that uses 100% green energy. And then you'll be able to step in and say, okay, Mr. Congressman, let me answer any questions that you have as far as this narrative, and let's debunk some of those myths that we might have had. You're not talking about theoretical things. You're not talking about potentially getting Bitcoin voters, or potentially raising Bitcoin funds, or potentially talking about a Bitcoin green energy narrative. We're having those people there with us right there in front of these congressmen. So if the book doesn't orange pill them, all the other extra add-ons that come with being a pro Bitcoin politician will become very evident to them very quickly.
I have a prediction, and it sounds like you probably fall in a similar line here, which is this is one of the most powerful tools that a politician could leverage in terms of getting people who are normally apolitical or a single issue voter. It's like an entirely new group of, like an entirely new demographic that is a powerful demographic, that the earlier that you can signal that you're for and pro Bitcoin, the better, because Bitcoiners are going to have a lot of money in the future, especially as Bitcoin adoption continues to grow. A lot of them care a lot about Bitcoin. And so it's like a single issue vote. If you're pro Bitcoin, if you're trying to help promote the adoption of Bitcoin, then a Bitcoiner is going to choose that above anything else of what you're saying, whether you're right or you're left, or you Democrat, Republican. If you're pushing forth Bitcoin and helping drive adoption, then Bitcoin is going to try and support that. So I think it's an incredible initiative. I'm excited to participate, and whenever you guys decide to set that date for. It's also not that far from me. I go to Maryland a lot, which is right by DC. So it's easy for me to make the trip out there.
Well, great. That's good to hear. So yeah, June 22nd, I believe, is the day that we would be like on the steps of the Capitol, talking to these people, going to the halls and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to be out there, right around there. But so there might be some other meetings and stuff like that happen, but we'll keep you in touch. But yeah, we would love to have you. I mean, it's cool for us because I'm a Sazmining user, so that's cool for me. But the fact that you're an Orange Pill app user. And so that's great that this symbiotic relationship can happen because of this social layer, again, of Bitcoin. Like, these social connections are really, really important, because a single Bitcoiner going to the steps of Congress doesn't probably, sadly, do a whole lot. Congress people need to see, we talked about earlier about people wasting your time, bots wasting your time, all that kind of stuff. Imagine the amount of noise that Congress people hear in a given day. I mean, between their messages and their emails and all that kind of stuff, they're constantly picked at for their ear and their attention. You need to have a very, very surgical, precise message. And we certainly have that. And we certainly have the people to back it up, and brilliant minds and connections. Again, Dennis Porter knows these people on a first name basis. And so I think we're going to have a really effective message going forward. And talking about playing a role in what could be a really important step in Bitcoin adoption sounds really compelling to me. Like, my name's not going to be written in a history book anywhere. Bitcoin will be written in the history books. And so for my kids and my grandkids to recognize that we played a role in this thing that was transformative in human history, like, I won't get to be famous to the world, but I will be famous within my family. My family is going to recognize the things that we built in this time, this transition time in human history, where we went from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped about that element of it.
Yeah. Maybe we can get some pickleball in.
Do you play?
I played tennis a lot. I've played racket sports. I don't really necessarily play. I've played before, but I've been wanting to play more. My family actually plays a lot more. But I've been busy with Sazmining, and so my extra time is normally just hitting the gym normally. It's also just coordinating, finding people to play with, and then traveling. It's just a lot easier. There's always a gym somewhere, so I'll just normally go and do that. For
sure. Yeah. That's great. Now, as far as your workout routine, what are you, like a weights kind of guy, or will you do like Pilates, or what do you do?
Well, growing up, I was only doing cardio, because every single sport I was doing was a cardio-based sport. Didn't really need to lift for tennis too much. But then once I stopped playing tennis, I just also didn't like cardio, even though that was all I was doing. It's like, I need to get in the weight room, start doing something that I actually enjoy. And I just really enjoy weightlifting. So my routine is initially at the beginning, I do compound lifts, and then I go to more isolation at the end. And then whenever I'm feeling ambitious, I'll try and do cardio. I've been trying to do more cardio now. I think I went like 7 years without doing cardio at all, aside from just playing tennis, stuff like that every once in a while. So it was just only lifting. And then the other day actually, it happened in a couple of times, but it was just one of those things where things just used to feel a lot easier, like going up an entire flight of steps, or just going and running somewhere, and then just realizing, I normally wouldn't have even noticed this. And now I'm kind of like huffing and puffing a little bit. So I've started trying to do some more cardio.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But what about you?
If somebody needed you to pick something up and put it in their truck, you'd be way better at it now. So you might get a little more tired going up the stairs. Yeah, better. Yeah, for me, man, I like to lift. I lift a few days a week. I don't know, like 3 or 4 days lifting, and then I do a lot of jiu-jitsu. Like, I love jiu-jitsu. I've done MMA, martial arts, and stuff like that for 14, 15 years. I've done jiu-jitsu specifically for 10 years. I started doing jiu-jitsu because I'd done kickboxing for a long time. And I thought I was such a good kickboxer that I could go do mixed martial arts and do a cage fight. And then I just got taken down and wrestled by a grappler. Every kickboxer thinks that they can just throw a knee in somebody's face if somebody tries to take them down. It's not that easy. Like, it's not easy to time somebody that just wants to take you down. So
it's not like the Masvidal Askren knockout or anything.
Yeah. See, that was beautiful. That, in my mind, that's probably what I thought I could have done.
See, I would have done that.
Yeah, exactly. If I do. but yeah, so losing a couple MMA fights to grapplers, I was like, I got to learn this jiu-jitsu thing. So that kind of set my jiu-jitsu journey in motion. And I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu in December. And so like, that's just been, that was a cool moment, because, you know, I haven't done a lot of things that took me 10 years to get. So that was a big moment. And yeah, I enjoy it.
That's awesome. It's actually something that I've always wanted to get into, but I've just never, and it's also the worst excuse that people hear all the time. Oh, I just don't have the time. I don't have the time. But I've just focused a lot on doing things like lifting, working out, and then maybe playing tennis or some other sports. I like spike ball a lot too, actually. So just random activities. But yeah, it's something that I've always wanted to start. And yeah, man, it's crazy how skilled, I mean, you know better than anyone else. I'm a big fan of MMA and like to watch boxing and stuff like that, but I've never actually done it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's just so easy to start, and most people catch the bug with it. That's why people stick with it. And there used to be this meme. It's like, how do you know somebody's a Bitcoiner, a CrossFitter, and they do jujitsu? It's like, because they tell you about it. You know, it's like, as soon as you meet somebody, you're like, I do jujitsu, we brag about it. You know, it's like, it's one of those things, but people get so passionate about it, kind of in the same way we were with Bitcoin, because you just get the bug for it. It might've been how you were with tennis and you know, lifting and that sort of thing too. But it is nice because it pairs the two elements that you have. You have that cardio history and that strength. You're more into the strength side of things. I feel like jujitsu is something where in kickboxing, Muay Thai that I used to do, it was very explosive. It was very cardio based, but jujitsu is like it's like human yoga, like mixed with weightlifting. Like, I don't know why when I said human yoga, because all yoga is human. It's like yoga with weightlifting combined, because you're grabbing, you're holding, you're squeezing, you're pulling, all that kind of stuff. But it's very taxing on the heart as well.
Yeah, I remember. Well, actually, the one thing about tennis. So I trained for tennis my entire life, and when you think of a tennis player, you don't think of someone who's really strong or big, but it's crazy how explosive tennis players are. To be a really good tennis player, you've got to be really explosive. And a lot of the exercises that you see these people in MMA or boxing, those types of exercises for being explosive, being very quick, having good cardio, a lot of it's very similar for tennis players. So I ended up playing tennis in college at a D1 level. And it was the first time that I ever had a really high level weightlifting coach coaching me up. And the program that he put us on, and this is a guy who would compete in powerlifting competitions, he was actually putting us on a routine that was pretty similar to what he was doing from a strength perspective. Because in tennis, you want to be very strong, but you don't want to have a ton of size, because your cardio is going to suffer and you're going to be carrying around too much weight. And so then after tennis, it was pretty easy for me to quickly bulk up. I just, instead of lifting more like a power lifter, I started implementing a little bit more like, you know, hypertrophy training as well at the end. So I'd still do the compound lifts for strength, but then at the end, implement some higher rep, time under tension, hypertrophy training to really try and get the size. Then also eat a lot, which I've always loved eating. And so I would normally have to stop myself from eating too much. And so that was the other thing. Maybe that's why I love weightlifting, because I can eat as much as I want.
Go to Chipotle and just go to town.
Yeah. I'll take a couple burritos. And then when you layer on the intermittent fasting, then you feel like you can eat unlimited amounts of food, because whenever you're sitting down, you're just housing like 2,000 calories, and then you feel full, and then you don't even want food anymore.
It's glorious, man. So what's your fast? What's your period of time?
Yeah, I've tried pretty much every type of fasting, everything from the 16-hour fast, 8-hour window, all the way down to my most extreme. I was eating only one meal a day. And by one meal a day, I'm sitting down and I'm chewing for an hour and a half straight, because that's how long it takes to eat like 3,000 calories in one sitting. And I've also tried keto and a lot of these other types of diets. But in the end, I would say that my favorite for mental clarity and getting as much work done as possible was actually keto and eating one meal a day. So I was literally on keto, eating one meal a day. It was kind of ridiculous. But the reason why I didn't like that was because socially it was very hard to do.
Yeah.
And what I'm on now, which I really, really like, is just eating, like just starting with like a shake earlier in the day. So just protein shake, and then don't really eat until later in the day when I have my one big meal where I just eat pretty much everything. And that still works for me, but it's not like a full fast anymore because I'm drinking a protein shake that'll have anywhere from 60 to 90 grams of protein in it with some athletic greens, and then my big meal later in the day. And I really like that because when I eat my big meal, I'm not as motivated after. It's like kind of tuckers me out. Yeah, I'll normally have my big meal around like 6, and then go to the gym either before or after, just depending on how busy I am with work. Yeah.
Nice.
What about you? What schedule are you on?
I mean, I kind of just eat when I want at this point. I don't eat breakfast, so I don't really, I don't eat till noon or 1. And I stop eating. I let myself kind of eat late though too. So I'll eat as late as like 9 or 10 at night sometimes. So it's not a super long window. It's like a 13, 14 hour window usually. So it's nothing too crazy. But I usually am getting in a couple training sessions a day.
I was going to ask.
I'm expending quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. From your training side, do you prefer to, do you prefer to work out full, fasted? What do you prefer?
So like with jiu-jitsu, I'll train, I'll get up early and I'll do like a 6 a.m. class. And that's obviously still in my fasted window. And so that's completely fasted. And then if I train again later in the day, that's usually on like post lunch or something like that. So, because you're burning so many calories in jiu-jitsu, I feel like it's pretty good for leaning out. I do find that with jiu-jitsu, my strength goes up. But if I want to look good for the beach, then I gotta adjust my training a little bit. So like this time of the year, I'm doing a little bit more weightlifting, a little bit less rolling in the gym. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of those things where, I don't want to be eating my 3,000 calories right before going to the beach. Like it is just crazy it's crazy how different you will look if you just have that type of an eating window where it's like before the meal versus after. It's like, oh wait, I just put on like 8 pounds of just raw bloat.
I'm a different human being right now. I'm like materially different than I was an hour ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like my body's in overdrive right now, just trying to figure out how to survive. Like I'll still like start sweating and yeah. But my diet definitely changes when I'm on the road. When I'm on the road, it's more so I just try and eat healthy foods, because the big thing is when you're traveling, you don't want to get sick, and you want to have high energy, and you want to be able to sleep well. And so you just want to do everything you can to eat healthy when you're on the road, and then just kind of get food whenever it fits with your travel schedule.
Yeah. I would eat like a total, I don't know, like a total fatty if it wasn't for my wife. She's the one that was always clean eating. And just, I mean, we'll have lots of butter and all that kind of stuff, but everything's like, we know exactly where it came from. We know the farmers that made it and all that stuff. So it's all super, super clean. Like I would probably never eat vegetables if it wasn't for my wife. Like we have 4 kids, and I'm like her pickiest eater. So she's the one that she gets on me, and she keeps me in check. I have no problem on the activity side. Like I'll get out and work my butt off. But when it comes to the discipline of eating right, I would be completely lost without her. And that's actually like one of the interesting things is that we've seen such an overlap between her community of like the holistic crowd that she follows and like the freedom and liberty movement of the holistic movement paired with the Bitcoin community. Like people that are Bitcoiners are now on her podcast, and people from her podcast are now on the Bitcoin podcast I listen to, because there's just such an overlap in this type of lifestyle. It's weird. It makes sense now looking at it, why it would come together. But it was pretty strange to me at the time, like a couple of years ago when we started to see a lot of this overlap between lifestyle beyond money, right? Like it was always easy to talk to people about money because it's like everybody likes money, but it's like people that are holistic, health minded. Maybe it's like the time preference thing, right? Your low time preference if you're thinking about not what tastes good in the moment, but you're thinking about like my health and my energy levels for the days and weeks to come. Like you said, when you're traveling, the easiest thing to do is like, I'm like right next to a Taco Bell. Like, let me just grab a burrito from here because I need to eat something. But like you said, you're thinking a day or two down the line of, if I get sick right now, I'm going to miss meetings. I'm going to be behind on work. I'm going to have to fly home, whatever. Yeah, we just think maybe a little bit further out because of that. So maybe that's it. I don't know. Why do you think those communities are overlapping? Like, I haven't fully pinned it beyond the time preference thing.
I think that you touched on a very important point on that. If I was to add to it, I would say the one other piece is just the people who adopt Bitcoin or the people who see it faster are the people who tend to be a little bit more open-minded or able to adjust the way that they view things, in my personal experience. And I think that has also probably led to that type of overlap. I mean, in order to really adopt that mindset of being healthy, trying to have that time preference gap where, hey, if you eat this chocolate bar right now, it's going to taste really good for the next 10 seconds, but then you're going to feel more shitty the rest of the day. And it's the same type of thing with just even work too. That's the other big thing is as someone who's building, there are just an unlimited number of things to do. And the food that you eat is just so directly tied to your energy levels. It's like, if I go and I eat a bunch of unhealthy food, then I'm going to cut my productive hours or availability of time to be able to do stuff by half for that day. And if you do it every single day, then that just compounds over time. And it's very easy. Everyone, I think, can grasp the compounding effect that money has, right? If you have $100,000 and you let that compound by 8% every single year, for the next 8 to 12 years, you're going to have a lot more money. You're going to have over doubled your money. But people don't really look at that from like an energy perspective as much. But I feel like people in Bitcoin do. I feel like people who have these longer time horizons in their decision making, are willing to sacrifice the short term. This is something that Kent actually brought up to me. I think he was the first person to bring this up to me. He mentioned how he thinks that on a Bitcoin standard, you're going to have people at a large scale thinking in a longer time horizon type of way. Because if you know that your Bitcoin today can buy, in your terms, a very cheap car, and then if you wait 4 years, you're going to be able to buy a car that's worth 3 times as much, then you might decide to wait. Or if you're deciding to spend money, whatever it is, you're always going to be incentivized to try and hold it because of the purchasing power that it accrues over time. Goes to Jeff Booth's writings as well, where he's talking about how when you look at society, you have these huge leaps and bounds in technology. Think about how efficient our society is today, the productivity gains of today's world compared to 50 years ago. But due to inflation, a lot of that productivity is masked. Every single year, we see the prices of these goods and services continue to rise. But with better technology, those prices should be coming down. This force of inflation is masking the technological innovation that's happening. And if you're thinking on a long time horizon, then and your Bitcoin in the future is going to buy more, then you're incentivized not to spend. But if you're living in an inflationary world like the world we have today, then you're incentivized to spend all of it today because you don't know how much less it's going to buy in the future. So inflation incentivizes a short-term mindset where you're just spend it, let's be hedonistic and get it all out today because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And then Bitcoin takes the approach of, hey, let's be responsible here. Let's save this Bitcoin. Let's not go out and spend it all on alcohol and booze and clubs. And let's save it because it's going to be worth so much more in the future. And I can do a lot with that in the future. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a great point. And I was thinking about something similar the other day about how we're going to probably be we're going to be the first generation that has a narrative flip on this story right here. Every generation before has told the next generation about how much more a dollar used to buy, right? Like grandpa told me, I remember stories that he said, oh, he used to buy a soda for a nickel. And my dad used to say he could buy a soda for a quarter. And then now I have to, when I was going to high school, I'd have to go to the vending machine and spend $1, right? Like that was the story from generation to generation. We're going to be the first generation, and then it's going to change from here on out that, wow, dad used to be able to buy so much less with his sats, and now we can buy so much more. It's the narrative that we pass down. Like, I don't think people ever thought of that. When grandpa was telling that story about the nickel and the soda pop that he used to buy, I don't think he thought he was encouraging his grandkids to think on a fiat mindset and to have a high time preference and to, you better go spend that money because it's devaluing every day. I don't think that's what he was trying to say. I think he was just trying to note something that he thought was interesting. But subconsciously, we've been told this story for generations and generations. So yeah, it compounds the effect of, I need to spend this money because it's devaluing. Like, our kids are going to hear the opposite. Like, it's going to be ingrained in our dinner conversations. And when we go to before our grandkids and we're sharing these stories, we're going to be subconsciously retraining them to think in terms of saving, to think in terms of, well, if grandpa, it could go from his sats not buying anything to buying a lot of stuff now. Like, I want to pass that on to the next generation. And it makes people think generationally. And I think that's the number one way that wealth is destroyed, is when people don't think generationally about the future dynasty of the family that they want to build, right? Or passing something better along. Maybe they don't have kids, but they want to pass something along to the next generation as a whole. So it makes people think more generationally and about being rewarded for the longer I can hold on to this thing, the better. So yeah, I think that just subconscious narratives will change. Things will change in ways that we don't even necessarily foresee, but I think it's for the better.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a beautiful point. I mean, imagine if you were living in Venezuela a while back and you're 20 years old and you're going and you're seeing all your friends going out and partying and spending all their money, and you decide, hey, look, I want to build a good future. I want to be responsible. I want to save my money. And you save up through your 20s, through your 30s, you're in your 40s. You've built up this great nest egg. You have a family. You're taking care of them. And then just like that, from something that is completely outside of your control, your currency's devalued, you erase everything. Now, what type of person do you want to try and reward in society? Do you want to go and say, to the person who was responsible and decided to take care of their family and decide to save, say, you idiot, why didn't you just go and spend all the money while you could? You're incentivizing people to not think long-term if you're going to punish the people who hold on to the currency and try and make those smart decisions. Yeah. It really is an evil type of way to set up a system if you're going to devalue and punish the people that decide to go and make those correct decisions and try and be responsible and save and invest in the future society. And right now, the system, unfortunately, under an inflationary system, rewards the people who are thinking more short term. So yeah, I do think that a lot of these things, I hadn't heard someone put it in those terms, though, the way that you mentioned it with, oh yeah, back in my day, this is how little I could buy this is how the little I could buy with Bitcoin versus today, those same, like 50 million Satoshis could buy this entire block.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's all changing. It's really cool to be a part of that. One last thing that just popped into my head about your Jeff Booth point, like inflation, I think is the big culprit with a lot of that stuff, but there are some things that, he points out in his book, that are going down in terms of cost, in terms of like real costs, like TVs, and TVs have gotten exponentially better and they're a fraction of the cost, right? It also begs the question, inflation plays a role, but how come it doesn't do that across every industry? I think what might be another common denominator is inflation paired with 3-letter agencies. If your good or service has a 3-letter agency behind it, then the cost of that thing is probably going to keep going up and up and up. So if it's a pharmaceutical drug, or if it's something like if the FDA is behind it, or the EPA, or the FBI is not behind anything, but any kind of regulatory agency or government agency that regulates a good or a service, I think you're going to see the technology not outpacing how much those agencies can raise the cost of regulation that makes the item cost more. Automobiles, that's another good example. Like we have, automobiles are better, but they're not cheaper. Like the average car is much more expensive based on like an annual salary than it was 40 years ago. And so, yeah, I think a lot of that's because of government regulation. Like I think cars would have become safer and they would have become better than they were before, even without government oversight. But unfortunately, yes, cars did get better, but the costs actually outpaced how much better they got in real terms as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see all these things play out. So I'm looking at the time. I realized that I went a little over, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you staying on longer. But for everyone listening, do you have any final words or final messages that you want to leave all the viewers with?
So as far as like my book, Bitcoin Evangelism, if you want to grab a copy of it, it's on it's on Audible. If you want the audio copy, it's on Amazon. If you want the paper copy. But I think it's a good resource for people. If somebody has a friend that's just kind of like on the edge of whether they're going to like dive into it or not, or if they have a friend that's into crypto and you're trying to like kind of share the tenets of Bitcoin and why that's important, I think it makes the case for both of those people. So yeah, I think that's a good resource. If anybody just flat out, maybe somebody's listening to this and they're in a country where they just like can't afford the book, just email or DM me. I'll send you the PDF of it. Like the Bitcoin Evangelism is not a money-making opportunity for me. It's really to put out a resource and to provide content for the community. And then as far as the Orange Pill app, which, like I said, we're totally mission focused at Orange Pill app. So if there's people that are listening that are Bitcoiners and you want to connect with other Bitcoiners, especially in real life, you want to find people that are near you, you can actually go on the app and this afternoon, grab a cup of coffee with somebody and chat for 4 hours with them. Like your spouse or your friends, they might be sick of hearing you bring up Bitcoin every day. And they might have been kind of interested when the banking stuff was going on in the last few weeks, but then you've kind of worn out your welcome and now they don't want to talk Bitcoin with you anymore. There's Bitcoiners that live near you that you can find through the app, and you can, strike up real life friendships with them. You can also use the app if you're going on the road. So like if I'm traveling to Miami, I can find people that are already in Miami, or I can, once I'm there, obviously I can just flip on location services and find people that are close to me. So it's a really good tool. And like I said, we're building new functions every month. There's basically something new coming out. The events page just came out there. So maybe you're not like, oh, I don't want to meet one-on-one with somebody because I'm uncomfortable with that. That's fine. You can find Bitcoin events in your area, or again, if you're traveling somewhere or you want to find a Bitcoin event that's in a certain date range, you can find all of those things. And we do some vetting of the events to make sure that they're Bitcoin only. So you're not going to show up to something and be surprised. It's like, oh, it's NFT Central over here, which can happen. If you find something posted online, they're not always Bitcoin only. So we curate that for you. And like I said, the Orange Pages is going to be coming out in a few months as well. That might be one of the big instrumental things for hyperbitcoinization, is helping to encourage merchants to adopt Bitcoin, because we have this social layer already built for them. We have a customer demographic already there for them. And so, if you want to build, I suggest people all the time, like, don't wait for the bear market. Don't wait for the bull market. Just right now, everybody can go out. You can go start mining Bitcoins with Sazmining. You can actually yourself be a part of the social layer through Orange Pill app. You can go, support somebody on Geyser Fund. You can support a Bitcoin project on Geyser Fund. If you want to help us Orange Pill Congress, you can give to that. If you find another project that on there that you want to support, go on there and do that. Everybody can do something. If you want your sats to be more valuable tomorrow, do something with some of those sats today. You don't need to spend your whole stash. But I think it's smart for Bitcoiners to take a certain allocation and see that as investment. Like, Will, you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. And I think that's like in our DNA. I think it's in the DNA of a lot of Bitcoiners, is to say, like, if I invest a little bit today, I'm going to get more tomorrow. So we don't mind investing in companies. It's like, why would you use your money on something today for something you're not going to get until tomorrow? Like, Bitcoiners understand that, but it is helpful to help Bitcoiners remember that you can invest in these projects because we're all just one community. I mean, sometimes the Bitcoin community feels huge, but at the same time, it's still relatively small compared to some of these mega corporations that are out there. So you can access CEOs of projects and CEOs of companies within the Bitcoin space pretty easily and find ways to support them. Maybe you don't have the funds to support them, but just a retweet, a like on a tweet here and there is also a great way to support these companies. So not just Orange Pill App, not just my book, but please support Sazmining, support these other Bitcoin projects, because hyperbitcoinization can literally happen like this week if we just decide to make it happen. And so that's kind of the mission, what we're going for with Orange Pill App.
That's a beautiful message to end on. Thank you so much, Brian. This has been incredible. And for everyone listening, highly recommend Brian's book. We actually had it as a book for Sazmining's book club. And I can personally attest it's a great book. I'm on the Orange Pill app. And until next time. As our journey comes to a close, make sure to stay connected with Sazmining for exclusive news and amazing offers. And we'd appreciate your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel to keep this content coming. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode.